The Kramer Defense 6.8 by 45mm urban combat cartridge is that cost-effective performance upgrade for the AR-15 M4 weapon system.
A viewer had asked me to look at the 6.8 Kramer Defense. I had never even heard of this cartridge, and it's been out for some time, and there's actually a very good reason why. Once I started looking at the cartridge, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So some of the reasons that the cartridge never caught on, I'm gonna need a pointer here, is one, timing. If it would have come out before the 6.8 SPC, it probably would have actually gotten popular. Another big reason is they went after the wrong market. What they were trying to do is replace the 5.56.
This favored weapon system, however, holds a serious flaw, a weak link. The weak link of the AR-15 rifle is the weapon's .223 Remington cartridge. The ineffectiveness of this cartridge is well documented in both law enforcement and military communities.
Unfortunately, that is not a feasible round to replace the 5.56. And it's funny because usually when people talk about replacing the 5.56 or it's not popular enough, they're AK fans. But if they look at the 7.62x39, that is also not a very good cartridge. The very country that designed, manufactured, and used that cartridge replaced it with the 5.45. It only took a couple of commies being tagged with our 5.56 for them to be like, oh, shit. We need that cartridge. So they went up with something similar, because the cartridge is actually really, really good. A lot of people just overlook it because they're like, oh my god, a 22 caliber bullet, it's not going to do anything.
The tiny 22 caliber bullet lacks the terminal performance to incapacitate adversaries quickly and efficiently, and is easily defeated by intermediate barriers.
Let's actually look at the ballistics of it. And we're also going to compare it against the 6.8 SPC, because that's a direct competitor with the 6.8 Kramer.
And because we are elastic by nature, we recover from that. Our tissue recovers, comes back together, and what's left is the permanent wound cavity, namely the crushing path that bullet took through us. This temporary wound cavity, as we expand and recover from, is different when projectiles hit at greater than 2,200 feet a second. At that point, it appears we have surpassed the elasticity capability of human tissue, and that temporary wound cavity begins tearing at its limits and margins and becomes the permanent wound cavity. The byproduct of that also seems that when a rifle projectile at those velocities bypasses an organ, you will still have organic damage.
Now obviously the velocity 2,200 feet per second matters, because once you drop below 2,200 feet per second, the bullet is very likely just to ice pick the target. You're not going to get that big permanent wound cavity from sheer velocity alone. What you would need is some sort of expansive tip and enough kinetic energy and a hard enough target to be able to push that open, and even then you're just looking at increasing the bullet size. You're not looking at the huge shockwave passing through. But where it really matters is the military. They're only allowed full metal jackets. So basically, their bullets have to hit the target faster than 2,200 feet per second. Otherwise, they're just going to punch a little clean hole through it. And unless they're lucky enough to hit a vital organ or a headshot or something like that, they're only going to wound the enemy.
Whereas a handgun projectile needs to directly hit a vital organ to do organic damage. Very big difference in the outcome most of the time.
The likelihood of taking them down isn't very high. So alright, we know about the 2,200 feet per second, 300 yards. That's where the 62 grain projectile out of the 5.56 drops below 300 yards. So if I have a choice, and I know I'm going to shoot farther than 300 yards, I will pick something else. I will go up to a long action and go with like a 308 or something like that. The 6.8 Kramer, 150 yards. That's half the distance the 5.56 can shoot. And B, I'm going to make this term up, hyper lethal. The 6.8 SPC, 250 yards. So which one performs the best? That would be the 5.56. Now, the next number, we're going to be looking at muzzle velocity. This is where I really think the 6.8 Kramer really failed, was with their marketing. As they were marketing it as it would be a replacement for the 5.56. And the .223 is the bee's knees when you're talking about this size weapon platform. Yes, obviously, if you go with a different size weapon platform, now I categorize mine different. The actual like SAMI spec how to categorize a weapon platform, like the action size, is by the cartridge it takes. But I can put a 22 conversion in this rifle. So what action size is it then? Or I can run like my SCAR 17, but I can put on a 223 conversion. So what action size is it then? Or what about the 9 mils? My system's better. This is how I categorize them. So basically, if you go with like a long action rifle, that's for gas guns, this isn't going to count for bolt actions, then yeah, you'll have a better cartridge. But inside this size action, this weight of rifle, without a doubt, the 223 is the best pick. So alright, muzzle velocity. Now, like I said, I would go with the 55 grain because that's what I feel is the best projectile for the AR-15. Is 2,900 feet per second. The 6.8 Kramer is 2,500 feet per second. The 6.8 SPC is 2,700 feet per second. Yes, these are all over 2,200 feet per second, so at the muzzle, they're both going to perform very well. Now, because the 6.8 is a wider diameter bullet and it's got more kinetic energy, at the muzzle, they are going to do more damage. The 223 really needs to be flying faster than 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle for the cartridge to truly work, to be truly effective like how it should be. Yes, you can go slower and it will still work, but to really get the damage and the potential of the 223, you should be going at least 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle. Now this is where I break my own rule. What barrel lengths can you go with that you'll be over 3,000 feet per second? With the 5.56 with a 55 grain projectile, you're looking at a 15-inch barrel. Basically anything shorter than a 15-inch barrel, and I'd be looking at changing the cartridge because I'm not going to get the true effect of the 223. With the 62 grain, you're looking at an 18-inch barrel. And like I said, this is where I break my own rule. Because I have an A2 carbine. So I had two choices. I could go slightly slower than 3,000 feet per second. It's like 2,900 feet per second. So about 100 feet per second too slow. I can put a 55 grain in here and then I will get 3,000 feet per second, but then my BDC wheel will be off. So I had to either pick between an accurate BDC wheel or 3,000 feet per second. So I'm feeding at 62 grain. Not really happy about that choice, but unfortunately all your A2s are calibrated for a 62 grain projectile. So if I ran like a 77 or a 55 in this, my range wheel is going to be off. And what makes this awesome is the range wheel. So it makes no sense to have the range wheel off. So therefore I'm running a 62 grain. That's also why I go with the carbine length gas system, because it's calibrated in two sides. You got carbine length and rifle length. Yes, mid-length is better, but then my BDC wheel will be off. And I want this to be on, so I can just look at the target, lays it out or whatever. Oh, it's, 500 meters away, spin this to 500, make my shot. Now that's really not that important because this is, at best, a 300-yard rifle. After that, it's going to drop below 2,200 feet per second, and if your cartridge is flying slower than 2,200 feet per second, you really should have something up around 200 grains. Just so you have the kinetic energy, the diameter, and the mass to still cause enough damage at that slower speed. Then you got your 77 grain projectile. You would need something like a 28-inch or a 30-inch barrel to hit 3,000 feet per second. So for me, a 77 grain projectile is useless unless I'm just popping holes in paper. But I don't. I hunt with my rifles, and they also have a secondary purpose, which I hope to never use, but to engage commies. So I want it to perform the best. So I would never ever feed an AR-15 with a 77 grain projectile because you can't get the muzzle velocity to truly exploit the potentials of the 223. Alright, next we got energy. This really matters if you're flying slower than 2,200 feet per second. If you're not flying slower than 2,200 feet per second, then you're still going to get enough damage to where kinetic energy don't really matter. It also matters if you're hunting bricks or concrete, or some sort of medium barrier target. I don't know about you, but I was always taught, once you fire a bullet, it's like busting a nut in a chick. You can't take it back, and there's potential consequences. You need to know where that projectile is going. I always hear people make the argument for a 30-30 because it's a good brush gun. I'm like, so you're insinuating you shoot through brush? Why would you do that? That is completely unsafe. That is an invalid argument. You should be able to see your target. Yes, in war, it's a little bit different because you're area shooting, and so, you're shooting through houses and stuff. But I'm not in war. I'm a civvy. I'm going to be hunting, so I will see my target. So for me, kinetic energy don't matter unless I'm hunting a grizzly bear or a moose. But if I'm going to switch projectiles because I know I'm hunting something like that, I'm going to go to a long action rifle or better. I'm going to use a 308 or a 300 Win Mag or something like that. The little bit of advantage that you're going to get from either 6.8 is completely negligible. It wouldn't really make a difference. If the 5.56 ain't going to do the job, this little bit of extra kinetic energy probably also isn't going to do the job. You only need enough kinetic energy to get into the vitals. Once you get past, we're hunting a grizzly bear now, the fur, the bone, and get into where it matters, then you're good to go. Kinetic energy is irrelevant at that point. If you can't get into there, then you need more kinetic energy. Again, something like that, I would not be going with the 6.8. I'd be going with the 308 or bigger. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages to the cartridge?
Other cartridge options have been developed to combat the AR-15 weak link, but all of them have fallen short due to their cost, increased recoil, reduced magazine capacity, and the expense required to modify existing weapons. What is needed is a cartridge that offers increased performance at all distances, has manageable recoil, maintains a 30-round magazine capacity, is easily adaptable to the existing weapon and its components, and is cost-effective.
Pro. It uses, alright, so your normal 6.8 SPC, this has proprietary brass. Makes it a pain in the ass. You always have to hunt down your brass at the range, and you have to order it in. No gun shops ever have it. Well, there was one, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. It just sucks. Your 6.8 Kramer is just a necked up 5.56. So you can go to the range with a little broom and a dustpan and collect all the brass you'd ever need. That is a huge pro, especially because it's not that popular, which makes the cost of everything go really, really high. The next pro is the cost. After you already have the initial setup, because you can use 5.56 brass, and you can just go to Fleet Farm or whatever and get a .277 projectile from a 270, and you're going to want to run 110 grain, because that's the sweet spot with 6.8. 115, it's getting too slow. But again, this isn't the 6.8 SPC, this is the 6.8 Kramer, so you're still slow no matter what. Next pro, a PDW. So because you have your barrel length restrictions on the 5.56, say you want to run like an AR-15 style short barrel rifle, something shorter than the M4, or a PDW, anything basically shorter than 15 inches, there isn't a 223 projectile you can put in there that's going to perform right, because they're all flying slower at the muzzle in 3,000 feet per second. That's where your kinetic energy and stuff starts to come into play. In a PDW, the 6.8 Kramer or the 6.8 SPC would be awesome because they have the kinetic energy. And even at those slower velocities, they still have enough to do some real damage. The 5.56, once you get below 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle, it really starts to lack. You keep it above 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle, as long as you're within 300 yards, you're good to go. Next would be a hunting restriction. A lot of states don't like the idea that you can hunt with this rifle, so they'll specifically write their hunting regulations to eliminate. They'll be like, anything smaller than a .23 caliber you can't hunt with. Wisconsin, we got lucky and they put .22 because whoever writ the regulation didn't know much about firearms, and the 223 is .224, and they put it as .220. So we can still hunt with AR-15s in Wisconsin. But some states go way crazy and they're just like, we don't even care about if the kill is humane or not. We just do not want you using this rifle, so you can't use any bottleneck cartridges. Even though they're extremely superior when it comes to hunting, nope, can't have that. Because I don't want you using a semi-auto. So as long as you're in a state that doesn't have a bottleneck restriction, chances are your 6.8 SPC or your 6.8 Kramer, you'll be able to hunt with it where you could not hunt with a 5.56. Now, what are the cons? This is why that projectile was never successful. Con number 1, they won't sell just a barrel. If they sold just a barrel, you could go to Magpul, get some mags, do a barrel change, pop in a new magazine, and you're good to go. They decided they're only going to sell it as complete uppers, and they want over $1,000 for them. That was the worst marketing move I have ever seen. What I would do is I'd put barrels out there, and as the barrels get successful, I'd be like, well, hey, you like our barrel, why don't you buy our complete upper? The next one is the magazine. You cannot directly put the 6.8 Kramer inside of a 223 magazine. Because of the fact that it's necked out, it doesn't fit in there right. Now you can reverse do it. So if you get a bunch of 6.8 Kramer magazines, you can put 223 in it. You just can't put 6.8 Kramer in a 223 mag. So you're going to have to buy special magazines. Next disadvantage is that start cost. If you want to get into it, you're dropping at least minimum $1,000. And you don't even have a lower yet. You're just getting the upper. Then you also got to buy new magazines. Not cool. You're also going to have to buy reloading dies because it's so unpopular, there's just not ammunition out there. You're going to have to load your own. Next disadvantage is the popularity. That also goes into reloading dies. You're going to have to reload your own ammo. So if you're unfamiliar with reloading, this is not the cartridge for you. So where would the 6.8 Kramer excel? If you hit these points. 1, you are familiar and comfortable with reloading ammunition. Number 2, you are running an AR-15 style rifle shorter than 15 inches. Any sort of PDW, anything like that, that would be ideal for the 6.8 Kramer or, the 6.8 SPC. But the 6.8 SPC, now you're having to buy a new barrel, new magazines, new bolt. It's a lot. And then none of your parts are interchangeable with your other rifles. So if you want a PDW and 6.8 Kramer, everything but the barrel and the magazine will be interchangeable. So if you need to steal a part off of that, or say the balloon goes up and everything goes nuts, you need to rob a part, like a bolt, something to that effect, you can take it out of the 6.8 Kramer where you could not out of the 6.8 SPC. So if you are building PDW, you're comfortable with reloading, and you want something that hits a little bit harder, which makes sense in a PDW, then you should look at the 6.8 Kramer. You also need to have deep pockets because you're going to have to buy a complete upper. And that's where they failed, because they did not make the parts available, and they did not go after the market of PDW. They went after the replacement of the 5.56, which you're not going to. In this size package, the 5.56 is the best cartridge. You cannot fit more capacity, which also the 6.8 Kramer has an advantage over the 6.8 SPC. This size magazine and 6.8 SPC, you're looking at 27 rounds. 6.8 Kramer, you're looking at a full 30. So you cannot fit more capacity, more firepower in a smaller and lighter package, of this size. You could always go to like a PDW and run like a 9mm or something like that, and then it's debatable. But this style of rifle, your 223 55 grain ammunition is as good as it's going to get, at least for now. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you'd like to check out my other videos, especially other ones on these types of topics, click the little link right there. If you'd like to help support the channel, there's always my Patreon, or you can go in the description to my affiliate links. Don't forget to subscribe.
The Kramer 6.8 was designed using the existing 223 Remington cartridge case and uses a larger 270 caliber 6.8mm projectile with weights of 110 and 115 grains and a proprietary propellant.